Good morning, people of the inner tubes. I have been neglecting this car for a little while as I've been focusing on the RX-7, but it's time to get the majority of the stuff all done on the STI. Now, if you aren't aware, this is my 2017 STI. It's got a 3.3 liter H6 swap in it from a 1995 Subaru SVX. We got the big turbo, we got all the fun stuff in there. Now, I am experiencing an issue with this car where we lose oil pressure above, not to zero, but we're losing oil pressure above 5,000 RPM. So we're gonna be completely revamping this oil system in this car. I've already been working on it a little bit off camera, but let me get you caught up to speed and let's get to cracking. I don't know if we're gonna get it all done in this video. This might be a two-part video, but we'll see how far we can get today. So for those of you that follow along, you may see something different in this engine bay, and that is the AccuSump sump up there. For the most part, I already have this thing installed and done. There's a couple things we still need to do with it though. What an AccuSump is a reservoir for oil. So this is a 2-quart AccuSump. You will notice it's not perfectly level. That is intentional. The gauge side is slightly higher, so that way if any air bubbles populate in there, it'll get pushed to the far end instead of being pushed to the oil end. So what this does is it equalizes pressure between the AccuSump and the engine. It holds about 2 quarts of oil. So in the event that we'll say our engine is running at 85 PSI and we drop down to 40 PSI, the AccuSump is going to make up that difference, and it's going to go from high pressure to low pressure. And it's going to start filling the engine with oil, or additional oil, I should say, to get oil pressure back up until that 2 quarts is either exceeded or the engine oil pressure and the AccuSump oil pressure equalize out. Now, in the event that the AccuSump does use all 2 quarts and it pushes all 2 quarts into the engine, it will also push 2 quarts back into the AccuSump to refill the AccuSump as it pressurizes to the same pressure as the engine. So the way that I have mine hooked up right now is I've got the AccuSump mounted on the firewall. We've got an electronic solenoid here with a pressure switch. Then we have it coming out through this line, which I still need to permanently install up, and it goes straight to the front port on the engine. So that way it can get engine oil obviously the easiest it can. Now, there's something kind of cool about using the electronic valve on this and having the AccuSump. Let's say you want to use it for other reasons aside from just equalizing oil pressure and having a safety. The electronic valve comes with a switch. I decided to install mine in a spot where it would be, you can't accidentally hit it, so you can go ahead, flip the switch on with the ignition on, and what that's going to do is pre-lubricate the engine before you start it. So it's going to push that 2 quarts of oil back into the engine, pre-lubricate everything so you'll have oil pressure. Then you can start the car as it has oil pressure, so that way you never have to dry start your engine again, especially if it's one that's been sitting for a little while. So with all that being said, we need to get the AccuSump finished hooked up. All we have to do is wire in the switch. We have this absolutely beefy oil cooler we're going to be installing. I do have a ported and shimmed 11mm oil pump, but I don't know if we're going to be installing that quite yet because I have a 12 on there, but with the addition of the oil cooler, we may want the extra flow from the 12. The other thing that we're going to need to do is drop the subframe down here. I've already drained the oil. I've got my big engine holder guy that'll go from frame rail to be able to hold this guy up, so that way we can get the oil pan off, because I need to get the oil pan off to take out the oil baffle, because I'm pretty sure that's what's causing our oil pressure drop. But before we do any of that, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up the AccuSump install. So I need to run this line into the cabin, run it up here to this little switch panel here, and then we're gonna pull a 12 volt switched source from the Haltech wiring up to the toggle switch, which will be right there, and that'll toggle the AccuSump on and off. There it is. I got it. Woo! So the AccuSump is all hooked up now. I've got all the lines tight. This one I'm gonna grab some P-clips so I can P-clip this down to the manifold right there just to keep this line like nice and tucked. But I've got the electronics all working on it. So I got the switch in the car. I ended up moving locations on it just because there wasn't enough space where it was. So I ended up going right inside of that cubby in there on the left-hand side. So I'll put you guys up here and you can hear the solenoid turn on and open as it goes. It's not pushing anything into the engine because the pressure switch isn't detecting any pressure, but you'll hear the solenoid turn on and turn off. So the AccuSump will let us do a couple things. It'll let us pre-lubricate the engine before startup. In the event of an oil pressure failure, whether that be the oil pump shattering again or some other oil pressure issue, the AccuSump will supply enough oil to keep the engine alive for 15 to 60 seconds, depending on the capacity, the viscosity of the oil, and the operating pressure. So it's not 100% foolproof, but this is such a good way to keep your engine alive in the event of a small misfortune. So I'm very excited for this. I wish I had a little bit more room to mount all this stuff. I did debate on externally mounting the solenoid, but we're so tight on room. I may end up going back and redoing the bracket for this catch can just to I can't really drop it down. I'd have to scoot it out a little bit and drop it down a little bit more. So that might be something that we do in the future. For right now, I'm not stressing it too much. It's mounted here. It's still independent of the solenoid. I did put some foam in between there in the event that they do touch, which I have a feeling they might, but I don't think it'll be anything detrimental. So if it does become a problem in the future, we can adjust that. I also got the pressure relief valve in there, which is a one-way valve. So if it sees too much pressure in the AccuSump, it'll eject that oil out. I do need to put a hose on that and run it underneath the car, or I might just run it back to this catch can. We'll see. I'm not gonna focus on that too much right now. We need to take the baffle out of this pan. I'm really not looking forward to doing this, but I absolutely have to. We have to take out this front subframe right here. So I've got my engine holder guy up here, so I'm gonna grab the chains, figure out good spots to hold this up. I see a 12 right there I can go off of. There's like a 14 down there. I'm gonna try to take off as little as I can. I don't wanna have to take the manifold off if I don't have to, because it's just a lot to put it back on, but if I need to, I can. I'm just trying to avoid that. So let me figure out a situation to hold the engine up, and then we'll go down there and start taking out the subframe, getting that oil pan off. I can tell you right now, I am not looking forward to this at all. So from a safety standpoint, I didn't feel comfortable using that engine holder with the manifold on there. I'd much rather have that thing bolted down to the engine. I used that on the RX-7 once and bolted it to the manifold, and it literally destroyed the lower intake manifold I had on the RX-7. So for safety reasons, I decided to pull the manifold, go straight to the block, just so I didn't die, because I hate doing this. I ended up taking the manifold off just for safety reasons. I feel a little bit safer about holding up this engine with it actually like bolted up to the engine. I hate doing that. I hate everything about dropping subframes and leaving engines in. It just feels wrong, but it's not gonna go anywhere. So let's start getting this subframe out. What we have to do is disconnect the front tie rods, get the front sway bar out. Then we can start undoing some of the suspension components that hold the sway bar in, or not the sway bar, but the subframe in, and then we can just drop it all down. Once the subframe is dropped, then we can start getting the oil pan out. It's such a tight fit with the engine swap that the 4 bolts back there that hold this pan to the engine, you can't get them unless you either pull the engine or drop the subframe. So we're gonna drop the subframe. There's a baffle in here that we're gonna end up taking out, which is what we believe to be the main factor as to why this thing is not allowing oil pressure to stay consistent above that 5,000 RPM point. Dude, I hate everything about this right now. So I have this front subframe out. It's sitting over here at the steering rack, and it's still, I'll give that a wipe down before we put that back in, but I need to get this oil pan off. I absolutely hate crawling under cars that are only being held up with this guy. So I'm gonna hop down here. I've already got most of the oil pan bolts out. I got the ones in the back that were being blocked by the subframe, so I'm gonna go ahead and break those free, unbolt the dipstick, get this oil pan out of here, get it cleaned up, get all the sealant cleaned up off everything, get the baffle pulled out, get this back on ASAP, and then get that subframe back in, because I don't feel comfortable doing this. So I'm just gonna zip right through this. I'm gonna time lapse through this. I'm sorry, you guys. It's just this type of crap just makes me extremely uncomfortable. So with the oil pan out, got to work cleaning it, getting all the old sealant off, getting any metal or debris that may be inside of the pan out from cleaning it. After that, I was taking a look online and I saw Killer B, IAG, all those other pans. They don't have fully closed baffles like this one did. So I took some time, made 15 additional 1/2-inch drainage holes into the baffle and put it back in. Hopefully thinking that this will fix our issue. There's a lot of my oil pan baffle right there. There's some more of it here. I went through and Swiss cheesed a lot of it to allow oil to actually flow through this back plate down in there. That's kind of what I figured to be the best course of action here. So I've already cleaned the mating surface on this. I'm going to clean it one more time with brake clean. I've already got the bottom of the car cleaned off, so that way we can just go ahead and seal this thing back up. I've got Melanie out here watching to make sure that I don't die, because I just don't feel super comfortable under there with the engine on this like crane thing. So let's get this guy sealed back up. Let's get it tossed back on. Hopefully this fixes our oil pressure loss above 5,000 RPM, and same with the baffle. So everything's cleaned out. Let's get it sealed back up and tossed back on. We have the subframe and everything back in. I do need to hook up the tie rods, put the sway bar in, get the lower control arms all bolted back on. From there, we can go ahead and get this thing, oh fuck, we gotta put the intake manifold back on. Then we'll get some oil in it. I'm gonna go out and test drive it and see how it reacts with this oil pan change. I was looking at a lot of designs from other companies like Killer Bee, IAG, and none of them have a totally closed baffle like we had on this. So I'm curious to see how this changes things. We are still going to be doing the 11mm pump downgrade from this 12mm, but we'll do that after we do a little bit of testing. Now that I have the AccuSump at least installed, I feel a little bit more comfortable about taking it out, so that way it can make up for some of the oil pressure loss if it needs to, but I want to see what happens. So let's start reassembling the bottom side, get this thing back on the ground, get everything bolted back up, so that way we can take this thing out, go drive it, and see how it does. What we need to do is go ahead and set the pressure gauge on the AccuSump to about 7 to 10 PSI, just to pre-ready it for startup. So I need to pull this thing off because the pressure gauge is back here and I just can't hit the Schrader valve. So we'll pull this thing off. Now for our tests of seeing if the oil pan baffle stuff changed anything, we are going to be leaving the AccuSump off, but since I just did an oil change, we are going to go ahead and pre-fill up the AccuSump just so that we have it on hand if, God forbid, we do need it, which I hope we don't, but you know, you never know. I got the AccuSump closed. We have 2 quarts of oil ready to go in the AccuSump now. I need to go ahead and check oil level, essentially put 2 more quarts back in. This thing should be good. I'm already seeing higher oil pressure though. I'm seeing oil pressure on cold start of like 110 to 120 PSI, where last time I was seeing oil pressure around like 85 to 90 PSI max. So I have a pretty good feeling about this. Ooh. Yeah, I can see the steam coming up through the oil right now. It's not even touching the dipstick. Are we on the dipstick? We're finally on the dipstick. No oil leaks. I've topped everything off. We are good on oil. Our AccuSump has an additional 2 quarts in it. Let's go drive this thing, see what our oil pressure is looking like at speed and above 5,000 RPM, but I have a pretty good feeling it's going to be fixed at this point. Let her idle for a minute and then take her out. I'm already seeing higher oil pressure, which is kind of nice. not drop above 5K RPM anymore. So problem was that oil baffle. We couldn't get the oil out of the heads and back into the sump quick enough. So that's dope. I'm still gonna swap that oil pump just because Jeremy told me to, down from the 12 down to the 11, but I'll probably wait to do that until after I've got the oil cooler installed, just to see how we're looking on flow and everything. But fuck yeah, no more oil pressure drop, baby. Big hyped right now. No more oil pressure drop. I still have that 11mm pump that I'm still gonna toss on there because that's the one Jeremy told me to put on, but I wanted to eliminate as many variables as possible. So I'm big hyped. Modifying the baffle, drilling those holes in there, allowed more drain back for the oil to be able to get down to the sump quick enough to be able to get back to the pickup tube and get back into the engine. So we are not experiencing an oil pressure drop above 5,000 RPM anymore. It holds steady at 95 PSI to redline. At least what our current red line is. I can't go past our current red line because we're not 100% tuned, but that is such good news to see. And we have the AccuSump installed as a backup to the system. So if anything goes wrong in the future, we have that extra 2 quarts in the AccuSump to be able to inject into the engine. So I am big hyped that we are maintaining 95 PSI all the way up. So I left the oil cooler out of this video and the 11mm pump, but that's all right. We will do the oil cooler in the next video to get all of the brackets and everything made up for where that's going to go. We can go ahead and get everything else kind of situated, and then this car will be good. I want to make sure this oil system is 100% so that way we don't experience any problems. I'd rather mitigate every little problem we have now before sending this thing to the dyno, which is what we're doing. So we'll add the oil cooler, we'll swap to the 11mm pump, and we should be good to go after that. But it is Thanksgiving for me because I'm editing and shooting this the day of Thanksgiving, so it's Thanksgiving for you guys. So I'm gonna hop out, I'm gonna go edit this, get it uploaded, go eat some food. Hope you guys have an awesome Thanksgiving if you're in the United States, or if you're in somewhere else in the world and you don't celebrate Thanksgiving. I hope you go have a very good dinner then. But with that, if you liked the video, you know what to do. Go ahead and hit that like button, turn it black, blue, green, yellow, purple, silver sign, whatever color turns for you. If you're not already subscribed to the channel and you want to be able to put in one of these corners, no idea which one quite yet. But with that, I'll catch you guys in the next one. So peace out, homies.